I'd like to welcome everybody to the AMFA Local 9 press conference of the Aircraft Mechanics Fraternal Association. My name is Joseph Prisco. I'm the president of the local here in San Francisco, United Airlines primary maintenance base. I'll also be your moderator today when we start the questions and answers, and I'll be introducing the speakers. Just some background on our local here. We have approximately 3,000 United Airlines members, and we also represent the United Airlines mechanics in Honolulu, the Hawaiian Islands chain. We also have approximately 200 Alaska Airlines mechanics in Oakland, San Francisco, Los Angeles, Phoenix, and Los Angeles. The speakers' introductions, people that will be speaking today, to my far left here is Stephen McFarland. He's our Assistant National Director. Next to him is David Frizzell, who's our United Airlines airline rep here at Local 9. And Jim Seitz, our United Airlines contract administrative coordinator for the system. And then we have our General Counsel, Lee Seaham, for the association. First, Jim Seitz is going to make some opening remarks, tell you why we're here, what we're doing, and then after Jim speaks, then we'll have Lee Seaham and then Steve McFarland, and we'll open it up for questions at that time.
My name is Jim Seitz. I represent 5,600 mechanics and related here at United Airlines, both in San Francisco and across the system in the United States. The airline industry has drastically changed since 2001. Our industry and profession have been hit particularly hard. United has never been subject to a strict discipline of an independent audit. This all changed in 2005 during the bankruptcy negotiations when AMFA negotiators insisted that language be inserted into the contract. Up until then, the union had no way to verify the outsourcing reports of the company, even if our eyes told us differently. We are here today because the independent auditor selected by the union and approved by the company has issued the first independent report on outsourcing of maintenance at United Airlines. Most of the work is done here in San Francisco. The contract language permits the outsourcing of up to 20% of the annual maintenance cost. The audit findings for 2005 reveal that 30% for that year was outsourced. This is 50% above the contractual limit. The outsourcing of maintenance work is in direct violation and a blow to our membership and their profession. Mechanics are responsible for the repair and maintenance of United Airlines aircraft and their components. The flying public knows we are responsible for the maintenance and release of the aircraft when we do the work. But the public does not know when the work is outsourced who is responsible for that work. It is common that outside vendors subcontract to other vendors. Few, if any, are under the same federal guidelines that our mechanics are under. Maintenance at UAL has drastically changed over the years. Maintenance at UAL has drastically changed over the 5 years. In 2001, we represented roughly 15,000 mechanics and related at United Airlines. In 2007, we represent 5,600 mechanics and related. Our profession was hit particularly hard. Many aircraft were put on the ground or retired during that time. It happened throughout the industry the same way. Thousands of our members were furloughed. These drastic changes can be seen in my own personal story. United Airlines used to have 3 maintenance bases doing the work and overhaul of aircraft across the United States: Indianapolis, Oakland, and San Francisco. Of those 3 maintenance bases, only San Francisco remains. Despite all we have been through, we find ourselves now confronted by a violation of contractual limits that many of us believe to be the case, but had no independent evidence to verify that. The independent auditor's findings change that. We stand here today to make clear it must stop now. The company must take steps to roll back the outsourcing of the work beyond the contractual limits. Outsourcing's only purpose is to pay cheaper labor without labor protections. The outrageous paycheck that the top executives recently received was driven off of the employees' concessions during the recent bankruptcy. That is wrong. It is our union, joined with 4 of the unions at United Airlines, to protest those payouts to top management. The United Airlines Union Coalition, which represents 30,000 workers on the United property, has formed a coalition to speak against those obscene payouts. Outsourced vendors are reaping big profits too, but they don't face the same strict regulations as our mechanics. The public needs to know that truth. Contract language and past practice provides that the company must sit down with the union to review the outsourced maintenance costs and discuss with the union the return of that work, something that has yet to happen with our leadership. We are willing to resolve this issue. We have told the company we are ready to resolve the dispute at any time and meet at any location. We've asked the company in negotiations and now to be transparent and open and honest with our workers. There is little trust on the floor to what the company says and when their practice proves otherwise. The company needs to sit down with the union and review the outsourced work and return work to our people. It is the first step towards bringing back strength and stability to our membership and to the company.
My name is Steve McFarlane. I am from the National Association. We represent 7 other carriers within the industry, and we have a very large footprint in the industry when it comes to safety and understanding what's going on. This is a significant event for us because this is an opportunity for us to point out to the public that outsourcing has been and continues to be a problem within the industry, and it's directly tied not only to jobs but to safety. And we are very concerned about this situation because we also fly on these airplanes. So do our family and all of you out in the audience. We are very concerned about what's happening, and we don't believe that the public is fully aware of it, mainly because it's human nature to want to get something for as cheap as you possibly can. Everyone thinks it's great that you can get a ticket for $199 and fly from here to New York. But do you understand why? It's not because something magic happened and all of a sudden it's cheap to do it. It's because something isn't as good as it used to be, and it's aircraft maintenance. And it could very well be something next year. Maybe they'll start outsourcing pilots, and now you won't have to have a licensed pilot sitting in the right seat. You only need one licensed pilot, right? Well, that's what we're doing with mechanics. It used to be that every person working on an airplane was a licensed aircraft mechanic. Today you have no idea. So I'm here today to share with everyone that the National Association is very much interested in this situation. We pledge our support and our resources to all of our United mechanics and members to make sure that United Airlines is held accountable. Thank you.
On January 31st, 2000, Alaska Airlines Flight 261 crashed into the sea, killing 88 people. The National Transportation Safety Board, the NTSB, did a study in which it concluded that the cause of the accident was attributable to the excessive spacing or excessive time interval between necessary maintenance checks, and also to the FAA's acquiescence to the increasing space between these maintenance checks. However, in ensuing years, Alaska Airlines continued to lay off hundreds of mechanics and reached the level in 2004 where it was outsourcing 80% of its maintenance. On January 8, 2003, U.S. Airways Express Flight 5481 crashed, killing 21 people. Here again, the National Transportation Safety Board conducted a study and attributed the accidents and all these deaths to negligent third-party maintenance, and here again, the FAA's negligent oversight of these third-party repair stations. The point we're trying to make is this is not just a job preservation issue. This is a critical safety issue that we're confronting. There has been a sea change in the last 6-7 years in the aircraft maintenance industry. Northwest Airlines used to have 9,500 maintenance and related employees. Today it has 950, a 90% reduction. United Airlines used to have approximately 15,000 mechanics and related personnel. Now it has approximately 5,600. The traveling public does not know this. The passengers don't know that for the most part, our airlines in this country have abandoned the direct performance of aircraft maintenance. And the source of the danger that we're facing in the industry today is not just that the airlines are distancing themselves from direct performance of this critical maintenance. But it also is aggravated by the fact of to which entities this maintenance is now going. This work is now routinely going to non-union repair stations where the employees are employed at will. That means they can be fired for any reason or no reason at all. And they're being sent to foreign repair stations in countries where the rule of law is not respected. As a labor attorney, I can tell you, and this is not a cliche, ladies and gentlemen, that the safety of our airline industry depends very heavily on American freedom and the American rule of law. Even in major airlines where there is a strong union culture, one cannot imagine the pressure on an individual mechanic who finds an aircraft is unairworthy, should not go into revenue service, and says this plane should not fly. When managers are breathing down his neck and saying we're about to lose $1 million in revenue, when his supervisors are judged and their bonuses are paid on the basis of how many aircraft are out of service, the pressure on that individual mechanic is enormous. And a mechanic has to be truly courageous to say this plane will not fly. But to a very large extent, the basis of that courage of the individual mechanic is based on the fact that he knows there is a union behind him. He knows he is subject to a just cause standard, and that his rights should, in given sufficient time, unfortunately sometimes they must wait 3 years or more, but their rights ultimately will be vindicated through the arbitration process. What is the contrast we're facing today? If you are an aircraft mechanic in a non-union repair station, you are an employee at will. That means you can be fired for any reason or no reason at all. And you cannot pretend that a Chinese, an aircraft technician in China, El Salvador, or Eastern Europe can do anything other than what he is told. His or her technical skills may be of the highest, but does he have the ability to dig in his heels and say this plane will not fly? And the reality is that he does not have that right if he wants to keep his job. And you should all be very frightened by this. When an airline ceases to perform its own maintenance directly, safety is degraded. When aircraft maintenance is performed by employees who have no employment rights, the result will be a vast increase in unairworthy aircraft. AMFA is determined to resist these trends. And that's what the contract dispute is all about. There is a contractual guarantee that United Airlines could only go so far in distancing itself, in abdicating the direct performance of its own aviation maintenance. And it is a company-approved auditor that has now determined that United Airlines has exceeded contractual limits by as much as 50%. And AMFA is seeking a dialogue with the company and a resolution of this interest, not only in the interest of job preservation, but in the interest of safety and in the interest of the traveling public.
As a result of outsourcing of work. And that's the first question. The second question is, there was a rally in Vancouver, British Columbia on Thursday. Air Canada has outsourced their entire maintenance program to Delta, which is outsourcing it to China. On a global level, what is AMFA and other unions doing? Because it seems that basically there's a surge of outsourcing in the United States and Canada to other countries to lower their costs. So it seems to be an international, global problem, not just in the United States.
AMFA's, we believe this overage, the company we're claiming is at 30% outsource. They're allowed to outsource 20%. We believe that translates to about $196 million. It's only for 2005. Now, it's kind of hard to break that down into exactly how much that is in salaries that have been lost. If we use the ratios that the company has been historically using for how much is labor and how much is material, we could estimate it's probably about 1,000 jobs, and that's only for 2005. We don't know what's gone on in 2006 and then what's going on this year now. The audit is an annual audit. We hope to be able to uncover that data also, but it's probably like 1,000 jobs. I don't have an exact number on what that salary is, but it's a considerable amount.
Are you asking for compensation, that money to go to those members or to the union, or compensation that should have gone to you in the first place?
Settlement portion, we have to settle the dispute first, and how that gets handled after we get agreement on did they violate the agreement, which we believe they did. Then we'll talk about how it gets settled, because the one thing we don't want to do is win the war but kill everybody in the process. So, but you asked a question about Air Canada specifically. Air Canada right now has what they call Air Canada Technical Services, which they're operating as an MRO. Delta Airlines was previously sending maintenance there, and they basically strong-armed Air Canada Technical Services into trying to lower their labor rates, their material rates. Air Canada said, we can't do that, and they said, fine, we're going to pull all our maintenance out of your facilities and we're going to send it to El Salvador. What's truly perverted about that is that the facility that they're going to send it to in El Salvador is 50% owned by Air Canada now. So they're going to actually make money whether it stays at their Canadian facility or not. Our brothers and sisters in the IAM are fighting the same battles that we are. The mechanics at Air Canada are represented by a union. And what that leads into is your question about what is AMFA doing. Our membership has recently approved an affiliation with Aircraft Engineers International, which is over 50 affiliated unions from around the world that represent aircraft maintenance. In other parts of the world, they're called engineers. Our membership approved that affiliation, so we're going to start more dialogue and international solidarity actions with our brothers and sisters from around the world. We're also attempting to negotiate terms that prevent the companies from sending this work out in the first place. That's our actions at the negotiations table. And finally, we have direct floor actions, whatever those turn out to be, that our members are getting more and more upset. They've said enough is enough, and so there's actually three things going on at the same time. International solidarity is being increased, negotiations are taking place under the Railway Labor Act, and then we're talking about direct floor actions from the floor, whatever those may be.
Korean-U.S. trade agreement apparently allows more of this outsourcing of jobs and other kinds of things. What is the union's position on these trade agreements and how they affected U.S. workers? Because there is some opposition in the United States to these trade agreements. And the other thing is the question of safety on a global level in the airline industry. Has it been deteriorating as a result of this outsourcing of work on a global level? Can you ascertain that, or do you have a view on that?
Well, trade agreements typically have been bad for American workers. They're also bad for the other countries' workers as well. It's the multinational companies who wind up the benefactors of all of these trade agreements. And as American workers, we've always scratched our head and wondered, why would our country be so eager to send all of our jobs overseas? Because it's supposed to be a trade agreement. In other words, trading goods, not trading jobs. And even if it was an equal trade, we might be interested in that, because there are no jobs being created by all of these trade agreements. If you have a country who exports coffee and we export shoes, that works out really well, because that helps both economies and both of them have jobs. But the trade agreements we have today does two things. It opens up the American market, which is a huge, wealthy market for all producers to sell their goods. And then it sends our jobs over into these other countries where the multinationals get the best of both worlds. They sell at their high dollar on their products, and they pay their workers peanuts. And that has to stop. The only way it's going to stop is for Americans, not just unionized workers, because it doesn't affect just unionized workers. It affects all Americans. And all you have to do is look around to see all these jobs are going away and they're not being replaced. And so as far as, obviously we're opposed to these trade agreements. If it was a goods trade agreement, I think that's good for everybody. But the end result is it's sending all of our jobs overseas and opening American markets to multinational companies. That's not good for anyone.
AMFA, the most extreme recent case, Northwest Airlines, where we saw one of the major airlines of the United States of America decrease their maintenance staff to 950. AMFA monitored a seven-month period in 2006, and there were 19 major maintenance-related incidents that made the public press. Many of these involved emergency landings. When the mechanics were at a higher staffing level, there was nowhere near this density of incidents. 19 publicly reported in major newspapers, many involving emergency landings, and we know to the extent these are making the newspapers and television, they are merely the tip of the iceberg. And what lies below that iceberg is truly frightening. Steve McFarlane gave me the analogy just this morning. He said, some people ask, well, there just aren't enough deaths yet. You know, you only point to 88 people dying here and 21 people dying here. Where are the hundreds of deaths? And it's like the man who jumped off a 10-story building, and now he passes you on the 5th floor, and you ask him, how's he doing? Well, he answers, so far just swell. And that's where we are. We're on that 5th floor and we're hurtling down. But we're already seeing the increase in emergency landings, the serious maintenance incidents, and it is the legacy of the maintenance that was performed in years past that has carried us to this point. But we are peeling away the layers of the onion. We're peeling away the redundancies. And it's just a matter of time. It's happening already. It's just a matter of time until we start seeing those fatalities mount.
Right, and I'll just add to that the specific question, is safety being degraded by outsourcing? The Department of Transportation Inspector General says that it is. They've made 2 separate reports. They just made another report just this past week where they were talking about the FAA does not have the time, the resources, or the manpower to adequately monitor these facilities because they're springing up all over the place. Used to be that airlines did most of their work in-house in one concentrated spot. It's harder for the FAA to monitor compliance. And we know that when compliance isn't monitored properly, that business people will try to say that, well, this wasn't being monitored and I thought I was doing it right, but I guess I wasn't. The fact is that as an aircraft mechanic myself and as a president of a local, I don't want somebody to die so that my members and myself can have a good paying job. That should never have to happen. We're not saying it's going to happen. What we're saying is that the layering of safety in this country is being degraded by it. But more importantly is that good paying union jobs, middle class America is shrinking because of this. And this is just one slice of what's happening in the United States. Aircraft maintenance is one portion of all the work that's being farmed out to other places. And on the flip side of the coin, our brothers and sisters in these other countries that don't have the benefit of being able to organize and unionize in the workplace are the ones that are being hurt too, because they're being taken advantage of, and that's not fair either. You know, we've talked to some of these people. We don't have anything against the individuals that are doing the work because they have to feed their families as well. But we're saying if we're going to compete with these countries, we need to be on a level playing field, and it's not that way today.
The question was asked, how has outsourcing affected safety? And the way that it's affected is the margin of safety continually is getting shrunk. And being a mechanic for 25 years, I've seen this take place incrementally. And one of the first things you saw was when an airplane comes into the hangar to be overhauled, we take it completely apart, we pull the engines off the landing gear, we do an extensive overhaul. We put it back together, and then we would go test fly it to make sure that all the systems worked properly and it was a safe airplane. Today, the test flight is a revenue passenger test flight. After that airplane has been completely disassembled and inspected and put back together, it's brought to the gate, it's loaded up with passengers, and they fly it for the very first time. Now that's a real example of what we used to do and what we're doing today. Why? Because fuel costs are expensive, flight crews are expensive, it's inconvenient to test fly it. And since we've had such a great record, everything seems to have worked before, why don't we keep doing it? Well, the reason we have such a good safety record is because of all those things that we used to do. And the airline industry is rapidly going through and seeing what they can do less of and still maintain safety. I don't want to find out where the bottom is, and I'm sure that most of our passengers don't want to find out either.
Well, has there been a loss of jobs in the FAA? And also,
How was Northwest Airlines allowed to operate with all these maintenance problems during the strike?
Well, that's a great question. I wish the FAA would come on camera and answer those. Our information tells us that the Northwest has great influence on the FAA. In fact, one of the things most people don't realize is that after you've worked at the airline for 35 years, you retire and you go to work for the FAA. And now you have all of these people that used to work for the carrier is now the oversight of the carrier. A very unseemly situation. And that's why in a lot of cases you don't have proper oversight. It's
Are you saying that the industry has taken control of the regulatory agencies?
Well, and they've had that for quite some time. And the FAA definitely is under-resourced, they're understaffed, and at a time when outsourced maintenance is expanding, the FAA's resources and inspectors are shrinking.
So how are they able to regulate the airline if their resources are shrinking and they are outsourcing in El Salvador and China and other countries?
Right, well, they simply can't. And if you talk to the FAA inspectors, they'll tell you the same thing themselves. Now, of course, they're concerned about losing their jobs and getting their boss upset with them. But the truth is, if you take them to the side and talk to them, they'll tell you that they simply cannot do what they've been asked to do adequately.
You think there's intimidation against FAA employees?
Oh, I know there is. In fact, a friend of mine, if he was willing to talk to you, would tell you things that you just simply wouldn't believe. And in fact, a senator in Minnesota had a hearing and gave him immunity. And unfortunately, because of politics and because of how powerful Northwest Airlines is, that went nowhere. But there absolutely is coercion, there's intimidation, and the flying public is not nearly as safe as they think that they are.
You think that the Congress should start to have congressional hearings and put these people under oath about the oversight and regulation of the airline industry?
Absolutely, and I would look forward to testifying as a 25-year mechanic who has seen all of the machinations of aircraft maintenance and what's happened, also living through the strike at Northwest Airlines and seeing what they were able to do with not only the bankruptcy laws helping them, but also Congress. Everywhere you look, it seems that there is it's not a conspiracy, but there's a concerted effort to make sure that the multinational corporations are able to get their way. As long as it's making money and it's profitable, everybody's smiling.
The airlines have argued that as a result of their bankruptcies, they're required to take this cost-saving measures. What's your answer to that?
Well, that's simply not true. They managed to come up with $40 million to pay their executives. Why can't they come up with a few $1 million to maintain their airplanes at a basic standard that most people think is being done today? My example earlier about a licensed pilot, I don't believe that most people would get on an airplane if they knew that the pilots weren't certified, trained pilots. But yet they are getting on the very same airplane that's being maintained by non-licensed, untrained mechanics without batting an eye. And why? Because they don't know.
The airline industry some in the airline industry have said they're going to move towards the virtual airline. What's your view on the idea of the virtual airline and how it would affect American public?
Actually, I think a virtual airline could work if what that means is that the carrier is concentrating on their passengers and customer service, and they've allowed another company to, say, maintain the airplanes and provide flight crews and fuel and so forth. If the outsourced company is actually doing their job and maintaining the aircraft under FAA regulations, that really wouldn't be such a problem. But the way these companies are able to profit is because they're shaving costs and through cutting corners.
What specific examples can you give about how this contracting out and outsourcing has affected airlines and examples that your mechanics have discovered of equipment that has not functioned properly as a result of outsourcing?
Well, again, I'll keep it very simple. We used to have in-house inspection. We still do. And all our parts and components that were worked in-house, each step of the way, they went through a pair of eyes to inspect the component, to see that the dimensions were correct, and so on and so forth, right? Well, now they outsource a component. Let's say they take your jacket and they outsource it, and it comes back, okay? They have a tag attached to it called an 8130. It's a universal tag, that all carriers use all around the world. Well, the companies now are only relying on that 8130 to say that your jacket is serviceable, that it can be worn, right? Well, what happened on the inbound portion of your jacket coming in is, well, who inspected it? Who did the dimensional checks? Who did this? Who checked the buttons? Who checked the sleeves? No one. because all they rely on now is that one piece of paper, that 8130, that says, oh, the vendor said that this is a good jacket. You get the point? So we have a component come in, you know, for an airplane, regardless, it's a unit that handles flight controls or landing gear or whatever, you know. These are very critical, safety-sensitive units. Well, you know, you have to do a certain amount of checks or components that belong to putting together an engine. You have to do dimensional checks. Well, we're not doing that no